The rain had been falling for hours, the kind that soaked into the ground and stayed there, refusing to leave. The house felt sealed off from the rest of the world, as if the storm had drawn a boundary around it. Every window rattled softly, and the sound of water sliding down the glass filled the silence. Being alone usually felt peaceful, but tonight the quiet felt crowded, heavy with something unspoken. The lights were on, yet the corners of the rooms seemed darker than usual. Shadows stretched farther than they should have, clinging to walls and doorways. The ticking clock in the living room echoed too loudly, each second marking time in a way that felt deliberate. You sat still, listening, realizing how unfamiliar your own home sounded when it was the only thing breathing. Thunder rolled somewhere far away, deep and slow. The rain answered immediately, striking the roof harder, faster. You noticed the sound wasn't even anymore. It came in waves, like footsteps circling the house. When you stood and walked to the window, the glass was cold beneath your fingers, and your reflection stared back at you with tired, watchful eyes. For a moment, you thought the reflection blinked when you didn't. You leaned closer, heart beating faster, but the face in the glass remained still. Just your imagination, you told yourself. The rain distorted everything, turning the outside world into a shifting blur. Still, you stepped back, uneasy, suddenly aware of how exposed the room felt. The hallway leading to the bedroom stretched out like a tunnel. You didn't remember it being that long. The light at the end flickered once, then steadied. Somewhere inside the walls, pipes knocked softly, but the sound felt too rhythmic, too slow. It reminded you of someone knocking, waiting for an answer. You tried to distract yourself by turning on the television, keeping the volume low so it wouldn't disturb the neighbors. The screen glowed, but the voices felt distant, hollow. Every quiet moment between dialogue felt stretched, filled by the rain and the constant awareness that you were completely alone. Or at least, supposed to be. The power flickered suddenly, plunging the room into darkness for half a second. When the lights came back, the air felt colder. You hadn't moved, yet something felt different, as if the house had shifted while you weren't looking. The clock resumed ticking, but now it sounded slower, heavier. From upstairs came a faint creak. You froze, listening. Old houses made noises all the time, you reminded yourself. Wood expanded and contracted, floors settled. But the sound came again, followed by another, like careful steps testing the floorboards. You held your breath. The steps stopped. Rain pressed harder against the windows, filling the silence left behind. You laughed softly, nervously, trying to shake the feeling crawling up your spine. Still, you turned the TV volume up a little, just enough to drown out the rest of the house. It didn't help. Your phone buzzed on the table beside you. The sudden sound made you jump. When you picked it up, there was no notification. No message. The screen glowed for a moment, then went dark again. As it did, you noticed something behind you in the reflection, movement, quick and close. You turned around. The room was empty. The rain changed then, softening, slowing. Individual drops became audible, each one distinct. The silence between them felt intentional, like something was listening along with you. You stood and walked toward the stairs, stopping at the bottom, staring up into the darkness above. The upstairs hallway light was off. You didn't remember turning it off. The darkness at the top of the stairs felt thick, heavy, like fog without the moisture. You placed one foot on the first step, then paused, suddenly unsure why you were going up there at all. A sound came from the hallway, fabric brushing against the wall. Slow. Careful. Someone moving without wanting to be heard. You stepped back, heart racing, and the sound stopped instantly. The timing was perfect, as if whatever made it had been waiting for your reaction. The rain outside picked up again, louder now, filling the space where the sound had been. You retreated to the living room and locked the door leading to the hallway, even though it had never had a lock before. The click sounded final, too loud in the quiet house. You sat on the couch, knees drawn close, listening. Minutes passed. Or hours. Time felt unreliable. The smell came next, damp earth mixed with something stale, something that didn't belong indoors. It drifted through the room slowly, like breath. You covered your nose, standing again, trying to trace the source. The windows were closed. The doors were locked. A soft knock echoed from somewhere inside the house. Not from the front door. The sound came again, closer this time. 3 slow taps. You backed away, your foot catching on the edge of the rug. When you looked down, you saw wet footprints leading across the floor, appearing one by one as if something invisible were walking toward you. You ran. The bedroom door slammed shut behind you, and you locked it with shaking hands. The rain hammered against the window beside the bed, louder than ever. You leaned against the door, listening, heart pounding so hard it hurt. On the other side, something moved. Slowly. The sound of fingers brushing against the wood. Testing. Waiting. The rain softened again, almost gentle now. The quiet that followed was worse than the noise. You slid down to the floor, pressing your hands over your ears, but you could still hear it, breathing. Close. Right outside the door. Your phone lit up beside you. An incoming call. No name. Just static where the number should be. You didn't answer. The ringing stopped on its own, replaced by a message notification. The screen displayed a single sentence. Don't open the door. The handle turned. Not violently. Not all at once. Just enough to let you know it could. You stared at it, frozen, waiting for the door to burst open. It didn't. Instead, the footsteps retreated, slow and unhurried, moving back down the hallway. The rain stopped completely. The silence pressed in, thick and absolute. You waited, counting your breaths, afraid to move. When nothing happened, you stood and approached the door. Your hand hovered over the lock, trembling. Before you could touch it, something whispered your name from inside the room. The sound came from behind you. You spun around. The room looked the same. Bed. Window. Closet door slightly open. You didn't remember leaving it open. The darkness inside felt deeper than it should have, swallowing the light around it. A drip echoed from the closet. Slow. Wet. Like rain falling onto wood. You backed away as the closet door creaked open wider on its own. Cold air spilled out, carrying the smell of rain and rot. Inside, something shifted, trying to take shape, its outline flickering like a reflection disturbed by water. You shut your eyes, whispering for it to stop. When you opened them again, the closet was empty. The door stood wide open, silent and still. Morning light eventually crept through the window, dull and gray. The rain returned, gentle and distant now. The house looked normal again. Too normal. No footprints. No smells. No sounds. But you knew. Even after you left that house, even after days passed and the skies cleared, the sound followed you. Whenever you were alone, whenever rain touched the ground, you heard it again, soft footsteps, careful breathing, waiting patiently for you to listen. Because it was never the house that was haunted. It was the rain. The rain found you again in a different city, on a different street, in a place that wasn't supposed to feel familiar. The apartment was small, high above the road, far from the quiet house you had left behind. You told yourself that whatever happened there was over, buried with that place. But the rain doesn't forget. It began the first night you moved in. A light drizzle against the balcony door, barely noticeable. The city lights blurred through the glass, stretching into long reflections on the wet streets below. You felt safe being surrounded by people, by noise, by distance. Still, The sound made your chest tighten in a way you couldn't explain. The apartment had its own silence once the city settled. Pipes hummed softly. Somewhere nearby, an elevator groaned as it climbed. But beneath it all was a quieter sound, almost hidden. A rhythm that didn't belong to the building. The rain tapped once, then twice, then paused, as if listening. You slept lightly that night. Dreams came in fragments, hallways filled with water, doors that opened into darkness, footsteps echoing behind you but never catching up. When you woke, your phone showed missed calls from unknown numbers. All received during the heaviest part of the storm. Days passed, and you adjusted. The rain came and went like it always does. You began to relax, convincing yourself that fear had followed you, not something else. The apartment felt ordinary in daylight. Too ordinary to hide anything unnatural. Then one evening, the rain returned without warning. It fell harder than before, drumming against the balcony door and windows, drowning out the city below. The sound filled every room, bouncing off the walls until the apartment felt smaller, tighter. You closed the door, drew the curtains, and tried to ignore the way the air grew cold. A soft sound came from the hallway outside your apartment. Barely audible. Like wet shoes against carpet. You paused, listening. The hallway was usually noisy, full of distant voices and footsteps. Tonight, there was nothing else. Just that slow, careful movement, stopping right outside your door. You checked the peephole. The hallway light flickered, casting long shadows across the floor. No one stood there. But the carpet beneath the door looked darker than the rest, as if soaked. The sound of breathing reached you through the door. Slow. Patient. You stepped back as a knock echoed through the apartment. Not loud. Not demanding. 3 gentle taps, exactly like before. Your heart pounded as the rain intensified, almost excited by your fear. The knock came again. You didn't answer. The sound moved away, retreating down the hallway, leaving behind silence that felt unnatural. The rain softened, as if disappointed. You locked the door, double-checked it, then sat on the couch, staring at nothing. That night, the building's fire alarm went off without explanation. Residents flooded into the hallway, confused and annoyed. You joined them, relieved by the presence of others. But as you stood among them, you noticed something strange. Everyone was dry. Except you. Water dripped from your sleeves onto the floor, leaving dark marks that didn't fade. People stared, uneasy, stepping away from you without realizing why. When the alarm shut off and everyone returned to their apartments, the hallway smelled faintly of rain. From then on, the entity didn't hide. You heard it in the walls when storms passed through. A soft shifting sound, moving between apartments, lingering near doors where people slept alone. Sometimes you heard whispers through the vents, half-formed words carried by damp air. It never spoke clearly. It didn't need to. One night, the elevator stopped between floors while you were inside. The lights flickered as rain hammered the roof above. The display glitched, showing symbols instead of numbers. Then the sound began, footsteps inside the elevator, slow and wet, pacing behind you. You turned. There was no one there. Water pooled around your feet, spreading across the floor from nowhere. The walls reflected movement that didn't exist, shapes shifting just beyond your vision. The footsteps stopped the moment you held your breath. When the elevator finally descended, the doors opened onto your floor as if nothing had happened. The carpet outside was dry. Silent. Normal. You stopped sleeping after that. Every storm felt closer now, louder. Rain followed you to work, to cafes, to crowded places. You saw it in reflections, on windows, mirrors, dark screens. Always behind you. Always just out of focus. One evening, while sitting alone in your apartment, you heard a sound from the balcony. Not rain. Not wind. Knocking. Slow. Careful. Familiar. You didn't move. You didn't look. You already knew what you'd see. The rain began falling upward, streaking against the glass in unnatural patterns. The knocking grew louder, more confident. Your phone vibrated. A message appeared on the screen. You moved. I followed. The balcony door handle turned on its own. The sound was soft, almost polite. The rain outside stopped completely, leaving behind a silence so heavy it made your ears ring. You understood then that distance didn't matter. Walls didn't matter. Other people didn't matter. As long as you were alone. As long as the rain could reach you. It would be there. The hospital had been closed for years, standing at the edge of the city like a forgotten memory no one wanted to revisit. Its windows were dark, many of them broken, and vines crept up the walls as if trying to pull the building back into the earth. When the rain began that evening, it seemed drawn to the place, falling heavier here than anywhere else around. You hadn't planned to go inside. You told yourself that. You were just curious, just passing by, just looking for shelter from the storm. But the entrance doors stood slightly open, swaying gently as rainwater ran across the cracked tiles inside. The building seemed to breathe, slow and deep. The moment you stepped in, the rain outside softened, as if listening. The air inside smelled of mold, disinfectant, and something faintly metallic. Your footsteps echoed too loudly, bouncing down empty corridors lined with peeling paint and rusted handrails. Lights flickered above, though the building had no power. One by one, fluorescent bulbs buzzed weakly to life, casting a sickly glow across the hallway. You stood frozen, watching shadows crawl along the walls as if they were alive. Somewhere deeper inside the hospital, water dripped steadily. Not from the ceiling. From the walls themselves. You moved slowly, every instinct telling you to leave, yet your feet carried you forward. Doors to patient rooms stood open, beds overturned, curtains swaying despite the still air. The rain outside began to tap against the broken windows, soft and patient. A wheelchair rolled across the hallway ahead of you. It moved only a few inches before stopping, facing your direction. The silence afterward felt deliberate. Heavy. As if the building was waiting to see what you would do next. You whispered to yourself, trying to ground your thoughts. Old buildings settle. Wind pushes things around. But the wheelchair hadn't fallen. It had rolled. The rain grew louder, drumming against the roof, seeping through cracks you couldn't see. Water pooled along the floor, spreading slowly, reflecting the flickering lights above. In those reflections, shapes moved that didn't match the hallway. You passed a nurse's station, papers scattered across the desk, monitors dark and broken. One screen flickered briefly, showing static, then a hallway camera feed. Not this hallway. Another one. In the feed, something stood at the far end of the corridor. Tall. Unmoving. Watching the camera. The screen went black. Your phone buzzed in your pocket. No signal. No notifications. Just the vibration, steady and calm, like a heartbeat that didn't belong to you. When you pulled it out, the screen showed a single word. Inside. The rain suddenly stopped. The silence was overwhelming. Even your breathing sounded wrong, too loud, too sharp. The lights flickered again, and when they steadied, the hallway had changed. Doors were gone. Walls stretched farther. The hospital felt larger, deeper, like it had unfolded around you. Footsteps echoed behind you. Not rushed. Not chasing. Walking at the same pace you were, matching every step. When you stopped, they stopped. When you turned around, the hallway behind you was empty, but wet footprints led away into the darkness. A low hum filled the air, coming from below. An elevator shaft. The doors at the end of the hallway stood open, rusted and bent. Inside was only darkness, and the sound of rain echoing far beneath. You didn't remember it raining inside before. As you approached, cold air spilled from the shaft, carrying the smell of damp earth. The sound of water grew louder, mixed with something else, soft whispering, overlapping voices speaking words you couldn't understand. You backed away, but the floor beneath you felt slick. Water spread rapidly now, covering your shoes, climbing your ankles. The whispers grew clearer, shaping into familiar tones. Voices you recognized. Voices you trusted. They called your name. Lights flickered again, and suddenly the hallway was full. Patients stood along the walls, pale and motionless, their eyes open but empty. Rain dripped from their hair, their clothes soaked as if they had walked through a storm that only they could see. None of them moved. Except one. At the far end of the hallway, something stepped forward. Its shape shifted with the flickering lights, never fully forming, like a reflection disturbed by water. You felt the same presence you had before, the same weight in the air. The rain began to fall upward. Water lifted from the floor, rising slowly toward the ceiling, carrying debris, papers, and broken equipment with it. The patients didn't react. They simply watched, waiting. Your phone vibrated again. You stayed too long. The entity moved closer, its footsteps wet and deliberate. Each step echoed like it was coming from inside your chest. You tried to scream, but the sound caught in your throat, drowned out by the sound of rain filling the hospital. Doors slammed shut all around you. The lights burst one by one, plunging the hallway into darkness. The only sound left was breathing. Not yours. When the rain finally stopped, the hospital returned to silence. Empty. Still. Abandoned once more. Morning came slowly. Sunlight crept through broken windows, illuminating dust and decay. There were no footprints. No water. No sign that anything had happened at all. But as you walked away from the building, rain began to fall again. Soft. Patient. And behind you, in the reflection of a broken window, something followed. The highway cut through the forest like a scar, long and narrow, surrounded by trees that leaned too close to the road. Rain fell steadily, blurring the yellow lines ahead until they felt more like suggestions than directions. You drove alone, headlights carving a thin tunnel through the darkness, the rest of the world swallowed by water and shadow. The radio crackled with static no matter what station you tried. Voices slipped in and out, distorted and distant, never finishing a sentence. You turned it off, letting the sound of rain take over. It drummed against the windshield, rhythmic and hypnotic, matching the slow beat of your heart. You hadn't planned to be out this late. The storm arrived faster than expected, clouds rolling in like something chasing the sun away. GPS showed miles of forest ahead, no towns, no rest stops. Just road. Just rain. The trees began to look the same after a while. Tall. Dark. Endless. Their branches twisted overhead, forming shapes that made your eyes linger too long. Every now and then, you thought you saw movement just beyond the headlights, but when you focused, there was nothing. A soft thump echoed from the roof of the car. You tightened your grip on the steering wheel. Probably a branch. Probably debris blown by the storm. Still, the sound came again, heavier this time, followed by something sliding slowly down the windshield before disappearing from view. The rain intensified, pouring so hard it drowned out everything else. Your wipers struggled to keep up, squeaking with each pass. That's when you noticed the footprints. They appeared briefly in the mud along the side of the road as your headlights swept past. Bare. Wet. Walking parallel to your car. You slowed instinctively, heart pounding, but the footprints vanished into darkness. You laughed under your breath, forcing calm. Rain played tricks on the eyes. Forests hid animals. Fear made patterns where none existed. You pressed the gas, eager to put distance between you and the thought. The engine sputtered. Once. Twice. Then the dashboard lights flickered, glowing dim before returning to normal. The car kept moving, but something felt wrong, like the road beneath you had shifted. The GPS screen went blank. Rain hammered the roof harder now, loud enough to feel inside your chest. The road narrowed, trees closing in, their trunks slick and dark. You were sure this stretch hadn't been here before. You would have remembered how tight it felt. The engine died without warning. Silence hit instantly, broken only by rain pounding the car. You sat frozen, hands still on the wheel, listening. The forest felt closer now, pressing in from all sides. Darkness swallowed the headlights as they shut off one by one. You tried the ignition. Nothing. That's when you heard footsteps. Slow. Careful. Wet. They circled the car, crunching softly on gravel and leaves. You couldn't see anything beyond the fogged windows, but you knew something was there. Waiting. Listening. The rain softened slightly, as if to make room for the sound. Your phone lit up on the passenger seat. No signal. No notifications. Just a message. Pull over. You swallowed hard. You were already stopped. The footsteps paused near the driver's door. Water dripped from something just outside, hitting the ground in uneven rhythm. Your breath fogged the glass as you leaned closer, trying to see. A shape passed briefly through the headlights' fading glow. Too tall. Too thin. It moved like a reflection instead of a body, bending strangely as it walked. The rain stopped. The silence that followed felt wrong, unnatural, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. You could hear your own pulse in your ears. Somewhere far away, something cracked, a branch, or bone. A knock came from the window. Not hard. Not threatening. Just enough to be heard. You shook your head, whispering to yourself, refusing to look. The knock came again, closer to the glass this time. You felt it vibrate through the door. Your phone buzzed. You shouldn't be alone. The knock slid upward, fingers dragging slowly across the glass, leaving streaks of water behind. You squeezed your eyes shut, tears mixing with fear, waiting for the window to shatter. It didn't. Instead, footsteps moved away from the car, retreating toward the forest. The rain began again, light at first, then steady, as if nothing had happened. The engine turned over suddenly. Lights flickered back to life. The dashboard glowed like it always had. You didn't hesitate. You pressed the gas and drove, heart racing, afraid the road might disappear if you slowed. Miles passed. Or minutes. Time felt broken. The forest eventually thinned, giving way to open road. A sign appeared ahead, rusted and barely readable. You didn't slow enough to read it. You didn't want to know where you were. When you finally reached a town, rain still falling softly, you pulled into a gas station, shaking. The lights were bright. People were there. You were safe. You stepped out of the car and froze. Wet footprints surrounded the vehicle. They led from the forest, to your door, and then continued past you, stretching toward the road ahead. Rain washed them away slowly, but the feeling remained. That night, in a motel room miles away, you listened to rain tap against the window and understood the truth you had been avoiding. It didn't need buildings. It didn't need walls. It followed roads. It followed storms. It followed anyone who found themselves alone long enough to listen. And somewhere beyond the trees, beyond the highway, it walked patiently through the rain. Waiting for the next ride. The rain began long before anyone noticed it was different. In old records, written in ink that had faded with time, there were mentions of storms that arrived without clouds and left without warning. People spoke of nights when water fell in perfect rhythm, when silence followed rain too closely to be natural. Long before highways and apartments, before hospitals and houses, there was a settlement built near a dense forest. The people there depended on rain for survival. They prayed for it, waited for it, feared the drought more than anything else. When the skies stayed empty for too long, they gathered together and asked for something to listen. Something answered. The rain came suddenly that night, heavy and relentless, soaking the land in hours. The people celebrated at first, dancing in the downpour, thanking whatever power had heard them. They did not notice that the rain fell only within the boundaries of the village, stopping sharply where the trees began. By morning, one of them was missing. They searched in the forest, calling his name, following footprints that led nowhere. The rain returned as they searched, falling harder with every hour. Another person vanished before nightfall. Then another. Always when they were alone. The elders wrote that the rain had learned something. It listened. It followed. It waited. They believed it was a spirit born of desperation, shaped by fear and silence. It did not take people violently. It followed them until they were isolated, until the sound of rain was the only thing they trusted. Then it stepped closer. They tried to appease it. Offerings were left in the forest during storms. Candles burned in the rain without going out. For a time, the disappearances slowed. But the rain never stopped returning. As generations passed, the village shrank. Houses were abandoned. Paths disappeared into overgrowth. The rain continued to fall, even when skies elsewhere were clear. Travelers avoided the place, reporting strange sounds and footprints that appeared beside their own. Eventually, the village was gone. But the rain remained. As cities grew, the rain learned new places. It flowed along roads, clung to buildings, followed people who carried loneliness with them. It no longer needed forests or rituals. It learned the shape of fear in tighter spaces. It learned that being alone made people listen. The entity was never a creature in the way humans understand. It had no single form. It existed in reflections, in dripping water, in footsteps softened by wet ground. It borrowed shapes only when it needed to be seen. Hospitals felt it first. Places full of quiet suffering. Long hallways. Closed doors. Rain pressed against windows as patients disappeared without explanation. Later, houses began to feel it. Apartments. Cars stopped on empty roads. It never entered crowds. It never followed joy. It followed silence. Those who encountered it often described the same thing. The rain changed first. It slowed. It listened. Then came the feeling of being watched, not with hunger, but with patience. It did not rush because it did not need to. Some believe the entity feeds on fear. Others think it feeds on attention. The old writing suggests something worse. It feeds on recognition. The moment you realize it is there, the moment you listen for it, it grows more real. That is why it never announces itself. That is why it knocks gently. That is why it waits until you are alone. The people who disappear are not taken in a physical sense. Their bodies are sometimes found. Sometimes not. What vanishes is something else. Something quiet inside them. Something that used to belong only to them. Those who survive are changed. They hear rain where there is none. They avoid silence. They leave lights on. They sleep with noise playing softly, afraid of what they might hear if they don't. Some try to tell others. Most stop trying. Because the rain makes people doubt. It washes away proof. It leaves behind only stories, and stories are easy to ignore. The entity does not want belief. It wants waiting. It follows those who move, but it belongs to places where people stop. Broken buildings. Empty roads. Rooms where someone sits alone, listening to the weather. It does not care about distance. It does not care about walls. The rain is only how it travels. If you listen closely during a storm, you might hear footsteps that don't match your own. You might notice the rain tapping in a pattern that feels intentional. You might feel the urge to check a window, a door, a reflection. That is how it begins. Not with terror. With curiosity. With silence between sounds. And if you ever find yourself alone during a storm, hearing rain that feels too close, too patient, remember this. It isn't trying to scare you. It is trying to see if you're listening. Because once you do, it never stops raining.